Okay, we're recording this, by the way, for everybody's benefit and for everybody's knowledge. We are recording so that we have a definite copy of what was presented here and what was said here. The election committee's job is to set in concrete, we hope, regulations specifically covering how the election in the Village of Martin's Additions will be conducted. So there's no question about it, and so that is what the committee is responsible for doing. We then prepare a preliminary election plan. That plan is submitted to the sitting council of the Village of Martin's Additions, and they have final say over what can be adopted and what can be changed. What our plan is tonight to have this open public meeting with an agenda and present it to the council so that the council will have it to bring up at their meeting on Thursday of this week. And hopefully they will then adopt an election plan, ours or whatever has been decided by the council at the January meeting. And then the information will be on the website on the election plan. The nomination period will open in February the 23rd and will close basically on election day. Well, it will actually close March 25th, and then we will have election day on May the 10th. So what we're talking about here basically is from tonight till May 10th is going to be our the job of the election committee and the council to make sure that this whole process is conducted in a fair and accurate manner. So I wanted to introduce we have three members of the election committee. The election committee, I think I can speak on behalf of them, is that we would prefer to have more than three members. That's up to the Village of Martin's Additions Council. But George McAleese is a member, Eric Shaw is a member, and Paul Weller, myself, is a member of this three-person committee. And we will start to work on this process coming up certainly within the next week or so, and follow it through with a whole series. We have a whole series of processes that we have to follow, and we intend to do that as best we can. So the agenda, this was published, I think, online today. We would have this welcome and the introductions that I just had, and then we need to elect a chair, and then that chair will then take over running the committee, and will be our spokesperson. What the three members of the committee will have the responsibility to nominate and elect a chairman. I would say before we really officially start here that I have a strict opposition to 3-hour meetings, and I don't want a 3-hour Zoom meeting. I would prefer to have a 1-hour Zoom meeting tonight. So let's shoot for 8:00 p.m. tonight if we can do that. So do we have any nominations from the three members of the committee for the chair of the committee?
Paul, this is Eric. I'd like to nominate George.
Okay. Do we have any other nominations? George McAleese would be nominated. Do we have a second on that nomination?
And I second my own nomination.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know if I can second myself.
No.
I think with a group of three, it winds up having to be a consensus one, because I don't know the exact rules on whether or not I'm allowed to second myself, but I'd say I'd accept if I'm nominated, but
Well, second the nomination.
Okay, we have a second then, I suppose. So it's been nominated and second that George McAleese will be the chairman of the election committee. All in favor, please raise your hand so we can see it. Okay. So Chairman, Mr. Chairman,
Wow.
I give the floor to you, and I think you have copies of the election plan that has been put together. I will say for the public's knowledge here that this was not a easy plan to put together. It has come together from a whole bunch of different pieces. It's similar, very similar to last year's election plan. It's been modified a little bit to the point that the election will be by total ballot mail-in. The ballots will be mailed into the office and or to the however the committee sets it up to our vendor. And then on election day, on May the 10th of 2023, we will have the opportunity, you will have the opportunity to bring your ballot physically to a ballot box at the Village of Martin's Additions office. And that will be open until 8 p.m. on May the 10th. At that point, we will close that ballot box and count the votes at that point. Or give them to the vendor, depending on how the committee wants to operate. So that's our process. We didn't have we are restricted by needing at least 3 members to have a legal committee meeting. We didn't have 3 committee members until just the last couple of days, and we have not had a full committee meeting. And the public that is going to be served by tonight's meeting of the committee. So with that, Mr. Chairman, if you would want to take over, that's fine.
yeah, thank you, Paul. And I appreciate all the work, Paul, you've done. Yeah, as we've been trying to pull things together while we've been a little shorthanded over the last few weeks. So I want to say thank you for all of your service on that, and looking forward to working with you again, working with Eric again. I think this should be a very good, very productive, very good, very collegial committee this year as we head into, the meat of the election cycle. As Paul mentioned, I know there was a draft version of plan that was sent unofficially, that was shared with some of the council members. I think the goal for tonight is we're walking through that plan and make sure that we're discussing in public some of the potential changes, some of the things that we want to hit on as a committee. I think one of the things that I wanted to start with discussing with Paul and discussing with Eric, because there was a question that came up last year during our formal lessons learned session. It came up last year throughout the election process. And it came up toward the beginning of the process when we were discussing some of the options, is what we want that mail-in election and the in-person drop-off event to look like. I think there was a question, Paul, I know on the draft that you had circulated, it was I think it was almost identical to last year. It was everybody gets mailed the ballot.
Very
You
close.
can bring a completed envelope to the drop box on election day. If you have lost yours, you can come down to the table, you can request a new one, you can ask, we'll void the old one. And you could also do that throughout the lead up to election day. I think one idea that had been brought up last year that I would be interested in discussing, Paul, with you and with Eric, is leaving open a little bit of flexibility for, depending on capabilities of the vendor. Would it be something where we change the language in the draft plan closer in line to the one I circulated, where it says you can come down to the table and the vendor will issue you a new ballot? Doesn't lock in that they have to mail you a new ballot. If it's something where it is possible for the vendor to have unassigned ballots there, where they would be able to build it, if they had a vendor rep there, where they would be able to void, someone could come down and say, I lost my ballot. Say, okay, your name is George McAleese. Great. We are taking down the ballot control number on your old one. We are voiding that. We are giving you a new packet right here. You can just fill it out at the table and drop it in the box. So that way people don't have to come down, request, and then have something else mailed over to them. If that was, and that might not be something that we can get from the vendors, but I wanted to see what you guys thought of trying to phrase the language so that that could potentially be an option to make it a little easier for everybody, where if they did lose their ballot, they don't have to come down and then have something mailed to them. It could be, they could come down and they could fill out a packet there.
George, is that gonna turn into people just neglecting the mail ballot and waiting to do it on the 10th?
Possibly. I mean, that's the major risk, right? Is that it's going to be longer lines at the table because we're seeing that stuff. I think part of why I was thinking of it though was that some of that feedback we got in the lessons learned session, looking at the survey answers last year, where people talked about having that mail-in option was great because not everyone can get down there, family concerns, if the weather's bad, whatever. Yeah, there might be some people who really want to vote in person and they're just going to ignore their mail ballot and come down and vote in person.
I'm not sure that's a bad thing
Yeah.
because some of the feedback was to get the old non-pandemic feeling of community back. Yeah.
And that's where I'd lean towards trying to seeing if that option's open from the vendor, because it might be one where we put this out to the bid and all the vendors are like, yeah, we wouldn't do that. It's like, okay, then we go with the system as we had it last year, where you can come down, you can request, we'll give them a list, they'll mail it. But I like the idea of trying to make it as easy as possible for people, right? Trying to maximize participation. Some people really want to be able to cast that vote at the table, fill it out, put it in the box. Great. Some people want to be able to do the mail because it's just way more convenient. And so I thought leaving that language open a little bit makes it a lot easier for people to have the option that works best for them.
George, I think it's obvious that if we have a complete total mail-in, that we'll get more participation, more ballots than having people just come down in person. So that's one of the reasons that this was changed, or at least to have mail-in ballots. So everyone would have a ballot and everyone could either mail it in or deliver it to the office.
Well, so that's where putting the language this way, I think, might work, because it's still, everyone is mailed a ballot at the beginning. Just like last year, we send the list, everybody gets a mail-in ballot.
Right.
And then they have the option of, do you want to fill out your ballot, bring it down, drop it in the box? You can do that. Do you want to come down, have a new ballot packet issued to you? Great, drop it in the box. That works for you. Do you want to mail it in? You can do that. So it's kind of providing the maximum number of options for people. So it's still, you get the benefit of the mail-in because everyone's had one mailed to them. Everyone has the option to mail it back in without having to go through the steps of previous years of having to specifically request a mail-in ballot. It's saying mail-in is the easiest one. You don't have to do anything special. If you want to vote in person, you can take that extra step. You can come down on the 10th, you can get a new packet issued to you, you can vote in person
Yeah.
that way if you want.
Great.
Could we coordinate that with the community activities committee and try to restore the neighborhood party type atmosphere? I mean,
Yeah, I think that could definitely be something we could coordinate. I think one thing I would want to flag is if this is a route we want to go, I think it's definitely one we want to talk to the council about having some, I know there's provisions in the charter where it's the council can name kind of temporary, I forget the term, adjunct members or something where, you know, some day of support, just so that way, if we go that route, I think there's a little more admin burden on the committee, just because you have to be able to provide some of that support at the table, and whether that's from vendor reps being there to do that, which I think is very much what I would prefer, is to have professional vendor reps there providing that support as part of the contract, but having a couple extra bodies at the table to help handle some of that intake, I think would be a way to ameliorate some of those concerns around the administrative burden. And especially, yeah, if it's something that could be folded into the return of the celebration on the sidewalk event.
Is there any downside to having the the event on the sidewalk, have that event? Is there a downside to that? There seemed to be, that seemed to surface somewhere in the last, I don't know, couple weeks or months. Does anybody have a reason that we would not have that sidewalk event?
I haven't heard one as we've gone through the last years. I think the only one would just be the, you know, it's a little extra coordination because we'd have to work with the other committees to make sure that they're handling the planning, because that's obviously not something we want to be trying to do at the same time as we're in the home stretch of dealing with the election. But I would not anticipate there being a major argument against it, other than obviously the public health consideration if there's whatever COVID thing we've got going on in the spring.
so the next step would be explore it with the vendor, see if that's possible. And
Yeah.
the council.
It's the
Right.
committee's responsibility to to engage the vendor. So
Mhm.
that's to be one of our responsibilities, certainly, you know, to that. May I ask, Eric and George, what's your feeling about having more than 3 members on this committee? Just for the public's information. Or did you favor to have 4 or 5 members? We had, you know, we started out a year or so ago with 5 members, and then we had 2 resignations. And then then we got down to just a 2, and then finally we got 3. But there's a lot of work here to do between now and May 10th. So
Yeah, more is gooder.
I'm sorry, but
More is gooder.
Eric, I'm with you. I know, maybe we can get Gene Sperling back. She would have enlightened it. Right, Gene?
Right.
How's Bill, by the way? Is Bill-
Actually, well, oh,
Yeah, okay.
we're hanging
Yeah.
in there. We have our fingers crossed. We have our fingers crossed. Sure. Thank you for asking. But yes, I would be very happy to idea. I was the one that came up with that whole celebration on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So I would be happy to actually execute the community side of that. Okay, put me on that list. Okay, is that good? Did anybody like that idea?
Yeah.
I'm there. Okay.
Would you be bartender?
Oh, I do that well too. Yes, indeed, absolutely.
Okay.
Paul, Eric, did you have anything else on the my thought on changing, updating and tweaking the plan language a little bit to provide a little bit of that, the optionality around the election day event to, I think the way I'd phrased it in the draft I did is just changing it from, instead of the vendor shall mail them a ballot, it just says the vendor shall void the old packet and shall issue them a new one. And that leaves us, I think, some flexibility where we can work with the vendor and put into the contract as to, we'll mail it, or we can have some that can be issued kind of on the spot.
No, I think the more flexible, the better in that case.
Okay. Eric, any other thoughts?
No, sir, sounds good.
Okay, then I propose I'll update the draft, make sure it kind of reflects that language. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Um, George, who interfaces with the vendor on this?
It's a combination of the manager and the committee provides inputs, and then I don't think the degree of like council involvement, I don't think winds up triggering as much. I think it's a question I'd want to run through with the manager, but in the past years, what it was basically the committee sets the criteria that the manager uses in issuing a request for proposal. And then I think it's going to be one where we as the committee we're not going to interface directly with the vendor, I would imagine. I think it's going to be, we're going to interface with the manager who is conveying our inputs to the vendors, and working with them as we try and iron out. I'm sure we're going to be sitting down in one of our meetings with the manager and running through what those proposals look like.
Great, great.
Okay. So Paul, one of the other ones that I had flagged when I took my pass at updating the language was the concern you had put in about the nominations deadline. And some of the feedback we got last year where people found confusing. Are there two deadlines? What is it? So I saw the way you had done it, and I also wanted to propose the way I had updated it, which is updating the language, because I viewed it as less of it's a process flaw and it's more of it's a communication issue. Kind of like we had the previous year when we talked about, unsigned ballots was really more of a comms issue than anything else. So the idea would be to be very clear in the language. There is one nomination deadline. It is whatever, March 17th, March 23rd, whatever it is. There is one nomination deadline.
March 25th in this case, March 25th.
Yeah, and we can lock in the dates. But it's going through and saying, look, that is the nomination deadline. People who are nominated, whether it's themselves, someone else, you change language. So instead of saying the deadline for them to submit their materials is March 24th, it just says, nominees will have a grace period, will have a period of up to X days to submit their paperwork. That way it's very clear. You can't submit your paperwork later if you haven't been nominated, but nominees have this period of time. And we had discussed this last year and the year before. And I think I like the idea of providing them with that little bit of that longer window because of something that somebody said last year that really resonated with me, which is making this as easy for people to run as possible. We wanted this to be a collegial environment. We want it to be, if it is that last day and you were weighing what yes or no, or one of your neighbors nominates you, we want to make sure that that doesn't preclude you from feeling like you could run. And so that's the idea of it. We've got a very clear deadline of you have to be nominated by X, but we've got a little bit of wiggle room. We've got a grace period for you to get your paperwork together, to get your material in. So that way we're not arbitrarily cutting it off. We're not raising that bar for people to make it harder for someone who is interested in serving, who's interested in running, of making it harder for them to run. So that's where I had proposed changing that language, keeping it with, in this case, I had drafted it as a 7-day grace period, but we can, I think, kind of set it however we want, but using it as messaging rather than as a policy issue.
I think our plan here is a 3-day period, but it could be a 7-day period as well. Yeah. Yeah, and again, the committee can make that change. But yeah, that's fine with me.
Eric, what's your thought?
Yeah, as long as it doesn't delay the next event, like the candidate forum, things like that, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, that's where I think we can take a look at the scheduling stuff, because obviously, yeah, we can't send out the packet until everybody has their info in, because we need, them to submit their personal statements and stuff. But if we've got the names, we can at least start doing ballot drafts. We can start coordinating with people on scheduling the forum, things like that. I know I had updated in my draft to reflect one of the pieces from feedback we got last year, which was people want to not do the forum until they've gotten the packet. Because I think that wasn't the case last year, because we had a really weird window that we had to have the forum by a certain date in order to get the ballots out. But that didn't leave enough time for the printers to print and mail out the ballot packets. So I think we want to, try and elongate that window until we have the forum. But I think we'd be able to press forward on at least doing drafts of the ballot. And then if for whatever reason someone doesn't submit their conflicts forms, they were, have been nominated, but they wind up not submitting any of the required paperwork, then it's just an issue of working with the vendor to take their names off the ballot, which I think is a lot easier. But we can at least get the initial names over on the good faith assumption that people will get their paperwork in time.
I think that should be public information, the timing of people submitting. Because if we do have somebody that pushes the limit and submits within, on day 7, that's important information.
Yeah, I think we can figure that out. The other benefit to doing it that way is if nobody is pushing that limit, right, then we can get the ballot, we can get all the stuff out, pushed around sooner, because we know as of 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, I forget what we wrote in the plan, as of 6 o'clock on the nominations day, okay, these are our 4 candidates. If we've got all the paperwork by Monday, we know it's locked and we can press forward and get it done. We're not waiting on stuff because, oh, well, we might get another thing. So we know it's locked in. But so I think, we can figure out if it's something that needs to be where it creates an issue around like the timeline for getting like things printed and hosting the forum and everything. But I think, giving them some time to get their paperwork together makes a lot of sense to me.
Question for the other 2 members of the committee. What kind of input do you feel is necessary, or at least is best for public input on the plan that we have, the preliminary plan that we have, and also the preliminary timeline? Should we be open to having residents come in and make comments on that and suggestions, or is that something the committee is going to do and then close when they send it to the council? What's the public feeling on that? I mean, what?
Well, I think, it's one. I know in some instances it's a little bit of a pain, and I'm sure Arthur and the rest of the council members know, the having to introduce something, but you have to wait a month before you can vote on it, I'm sure is a pain in a lot of ways. But I think this is a good example of how it will work, because due to circumstances that were outside our control, we haven't had a meeting where people have had a lot of chances to weigh in on this, but they're going to have opportunities over the next month until the council votes on a final draft version to provide comments. And I think that's going to be really valuable, because it's going to be a chance where we're weighing some inputs from a lot of people. And most importantly, the council's weighing those inputs before they settle on something. So I think, I'm sure we're going to wind up fielding some comments. Can say chairing, I'm checking the box pretty regularly. If anyone has comments they want to send over and something that, you'd like to see us discuss, adding, reflecting in there, I'm always happy to hear from everyone and kind of have that kind of weighed in as people send stuff into the box. If it's something where we're making updated recommendations to the council before they're introducing it Thursday, I think, and then before they're going to wind up voting on it in January. And then
Okay.
I think a lot of the nuance, as we discovered in the last few years, we wind up doing kind of subsequent stuff depending on who exactly the vendor is. Then we wind up doing some voting on like the vote counting procedures. And that's another opportunity for people to weigh in on like what works for you as a resident of the village, or what worked for you as a candidate in terms of, making sure that that's reflective of those. So this is not, the last bite at the apple, as it were.
Okay, so we have there, the public then would have a 5-week, almost a 5-week period where they could comment on the plan that we submit. Because it would not be finally taken up until January the 19th, I guess it is, which is the next council meeting. And if we give it to them now, they would have almost 5 weeks, the public to comment to the council. And the council then could make any changes or accept what we gave them verbatim, for that matter. Is that right?
That's my understanding, and they can make changes. The residents can provide comment to us, to the council. We can provide updated comments. It's my understanding where we hand them something they need to introduce, but then we can provide them with kind of some updated, here's some additional comments from the election committee if we want to propose changes over the next 5 weeks. But yeah, it's my understanding that that's the benefit of those 5 weeks.
Call from Weller, Jeffrey.
So yeah, I think that was one. Eric, Paul, any other comments on the updating the language to provide that grace period for people to get their materials in?
No, I think a week though is the max I would go.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay. Motion to incorporate that into the updated draft.
also move.
Seconded. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Okay. Paul, I want to say kudos on the good catch on, I don't know where the electioneering zone stuff, how that disappeared last year. I know it was in some of the drafts that we coordinated and kicked up to the council, so I don't know where that disappeared. So good catch on getting that built into the new one.
Somebody didn't like it, that's for sure.
The other big change I had, that I think this was one where you saw me looking to the side. I was trying to pull up a calendar. Paul, between the draft you had sent and then when I went through and did kind of an update sweep on some of the language, was just figuring out exactly what we want the timeline to look like. Because I think we had the difference of like a couple of days here and there on what we had listed for election days and the various deadline days. Do you want to walk through just kind of how your process, and then I can kind of talk a little bit about mine, and we can figure out what exactly we want to do for those big milestone dates of election day, ballots received by day, nomination period, etc.
Right, yeah. And,
Do you want to just walk through your process a little bit?
to my process, you say?
Yeah, just how you why you would pick the dates that you were looking at.
Well, the dates that I have here are mostly into March dates, but basically it's a matter of however we need to gather data and open this up to input from the public. These dates could be changed in any way. I have a list of dates here, but they can change.
Yeah. Right.
They're not set in concrete, that's for sure. And that's something that the committee, when the committee meets again, it should be a public meeting certainly, and we might have input, in saying, wait a minute, you said March 25th, but it should be the 28th or something like that. But anyhow, my timeline is just basically on the preliminary plan that we have prepared.
Mhm.
As I said, it wasn't set down with a full committee meeting because we didn't have a full committee, so.
All right. Yeah, so the dates I had pulled, and Paul, tell me how close these are to kind of where your thinking was the call for candidates / nominations period opening is Friday, February 17th. And then it's nomination periods open for a month. So nominations close on the 17th of March. So that's also Friday. So Friday, the 17th, the 6th is when the nominations period would close. Nominees can have up to 7 days to get their stuff turned in for the ballot packets and everything. But we'd have at least the name so we can get that over and start getting those prepped.
George,
yeah.
the timeline that I have basically is opening the nomination period 75 days before election day on May 10th, and then ending at 45 days before election day, May 10th. Whatever, it was basically 75 days and 45 days. So you had a 30 day there. Anyhow, but that can be changed too, of course, but it was based upon, we counted back from May 10th, 75 days, 45 days and so forth.
Mhm.
So,
Okay, yeah, I think my draft one had the nominations period open for 28 days. We can elongate that if
yeah,
people felt like it was a little condensed last year, we can flip it around. But yeah, my understanding was, yeah, I basically just took last year's dates and made, kind of the tweaks to deal with just calendar shift again.
okay.
And I had written election day as May 9th, just if we wanted to keep it on a Tuesday, but I don't really, that's not a hard and fast one where I'm saying, oh, we must do it on a Tuesday. If we want to keep the 10th because we just like the number and keep it on and have it land on a Wednesday this year, I'm fine with that as well.
May 10th is Wednesday,
Yeah.
23, and you could do it on a Tuesday, but anyhow.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I'm walking it back, updating. I can, if we like the idea, I can update the plan to reflect that it's walking back the official.
Yeah, that's how we did it. Yeah.
45 days, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I think that makes sense to me about, shoot for nominations open mid-February approximately, nominations close mid-March. That gives us enough time to get the ballots and the election packets printed and mailed, have the forum sometime shooting for early April. People should start getting their ballots shortly after that. I think, trying to coordinate with the vendor to get them to people as soon as humanly possible. Having the election day, May 9th or 10th, and then, somewhere between a week and 2 weeks is when we put the deadline for when we need ballots back.
Yeah, so we need to agree on the election day, whether it's the 9th or the 10th or whatever. And then I would back up a set number of days from that. So anyhow, again, that could be changed by the committee or so forth.
Yep. And I know there's some charter requirements, but they're pretty low, I think, and we don't want to mess with those. But I think, if we want to say 45 days back from election day, if that's generally what's worked in the past, great. I can walk those back and land it. I think the only possible tweak on that would be going slightly on the long side if it means we can bundle like the call for nominations into, if we like the idea of it on a Friday. I know we've done that in the past because it meant we could promote it in the newsletter, but maybe we want to do it this year. I would say a lesson learned would be maybe we open it on a Thursday with a standalone email. And that way then, you know, it can be a second reminder in the newsletter as the Friday one, but people aren't getting both the official call for candidates on Friday and the weekly email and stuff. So maybe we say it's 45 days and then it's whatever the preceding Thursday is, would be where it opens.
I think the reason May 10th was picked initially was that, you know, it was an easy date to remember as opposed to a 27th or 30th or what, I mean, you know, May 10th just seemed to hit in people's minds that, hey, I remember that date. So, but again, these are questions that the committee can work out.
Yeah. Eric, do you have a vote between the 9th and the 10th?
I like 5 and dime.
Perfect. Okay, let's do May 10th. All in favor of May 10th for election day? Aye,
Aye.
great. All right. What do you think about my plan for, working backwards from the 10th, go to 45 days back is when nominations period closes, and just pick 45 days and then whatever the preceding Thursday is. So that can give us anywhere between 45 and 51 days prior to election.
Why Thursday?
It could be a Wednesday, but I picked Thursday. Just, I know in past years we've done it on Friday, but I'm a little concerned. It does just off my experience. Sometimes we would have that email would go out on Friday, but then you would also have the weekly village newsletter, and just that might make, you know, people think they got a double email. They might not pay as much attention. So if we do Thursday, we can have a standalone, here is a thing. And then the other benefit is then on the back end, because if we do Thursday is when nominations are due on a Thursday, then Friday we can get a faster jump on, okay, this is how many candidates we have. We can work with the manager on Friday. It's starting to get that stuff to the vendor, to the printer, et cetera, as opposed to some of the time leading up to election is wasted because it's, you know, we're not even getting stuff to people for 2 or 2.5 days.
That makes sense.
Paul, what do you think?
I'm fine. I'm looking here at the deadline, the newsletter deadlines. There's a deadline on newsletter deadline on Friday, March 31st. There's one on Friday, March 20 or April 28th. The newsletter deadlines, so they're on Fridays. So we need to get it, you know, to the newsletter before the so they have time to put it in the newsletter. That's for sure.
Yep. And the weekly roundups and
So
everything else.
So that's what I think. That's why Wednesday, you know, we gave them 2 days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyhow.
Okay. I think Wednesday works great for me.
Yeah. Then they have 2 days to get it in the newsletter.
Okay. Okay. So I propose that we update the dates. We say election day is May 10th. We'll do 45 days back, and whatever the Wednesday preceding 45 days is.
I think it was 75 days is what it was. So that's, yeah. But
So I
whatever.
thought it was 45 days to the nominations close, 75 to nominations open.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's right.
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah.
So we make nominations close, whatever the 45 days back and the next preceding Wednesday is, and I'll sit down with the calendar, just do the tick marks. And then 30 days prior to that for nomination period opens.
Okay.
I'm so motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. Okay.
You want resident comments? We've got quite a few residents on here.
Yeah. So that was, I think all the stuff in the version that I had updated, other than the last one that was in the draft, like kind of with the changes I had made and discussed, was some of the stuff that we had last year where it was trying to, I made some tweaks to the language around when ballots could go out, when we had to have the forum, et cetera, to try and make sure that it is something where the election packet, not the ballots, but the election packet is to people before we have the forum, and then targeting getting ballots, start getting ballots in people's hands. Start getting ballots in people's hands right after the forum. And then Paul, I had made in my draft, I had made a little bit of just a tweak to the language that you would put in around the concern that cropped up last year around people who were not going to be at a mailing address during the election period. It was just tweaking it to basically say, the committee will, discuss, have vote on, to kind of taking all reasonable efforts to ensure that people have their ballots where it is feasible, kind of thing. Like if the ballots are available to be printed, then we will do everything that is possible to get them over to people if for whatever reason they're not in going to be at their mailing address during the election period.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was all the stuff I had looked at. Paul, did you have other issues that you wanted to discuss, make sure are kind of reflected, incorporated?
I don't think so. I think we're on target.
Okay.
What we talked about here. Yeah.
Okay. So what I would propose is the draft that I had circulated, taking that, making the updates that we had, kind of using that as the baseline, and then making the changes and kind of language updates that we had discussed tonight, getting that bundled up. We can kind of kick that and make that our kind of updated working draft.
Sounds good.
Okay. Paul, does that sound good?
No.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. So I'll make those updates. I'll circulate those around, and my understanding based off the last 2 years is that I'll be able to email that to you guys, because those are accepting kind of the changes to the updated draft is now would be administrative. And so I'll get those circulated so that way you guys can take a look, make sure the updated draft reflects what we have discussed during this meeting.
Can you
Okay.
highlight the changes, George?
Yeah.
Thank
Do you
you.
find it easier when I do the track changes one, or do you want me to like do them in a different color text and put yellow highlighting over it?
More is gooder.
Okay. I will make it as kind of spotlighty as possible so you can see kind of where those updates have been reflected.
Thank you.
Okay. Paul, did you have anything else you wanted to cover on the draft plan for council to introduce at its meeting on Thursday?
I don't think so. I went over it right before.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you had made obviously some edits to the one that I had sent forward, and I'm sure you've got good rationale, I think, for those. So I'm okay with it. Yeah.
Okay, then I motion that I'll take the draft that I had sent around, use that as our baseline, make the updates that we discussed, circulate it to you, and we can send updated draft over to the council members. So I motion that is our steps going forward.
Okay, I'll second it.
Paul, second.
All
All in
right.
favor? Aye.
Aye.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when should Michael put this on the website for everybody to look at?
I mean, I'll bundle it. Assuming I can get the changes and you guys take a quick look at them and we get them back, we'll send it up to the council. And I would imagine it would be, if we can get them turned around tomorrow functionally, because these are pretty minimal edits at this point. But if we can get it done, then I would hope it would be able to be something that would be in the council's packet for the Thursday meeting, and if it's not something that can be reflected, I would imagine before, probably sometime early next week, if it's
Right.
something where we wind up having to delay a little bit.
After the council's had an opportunity to look at it, yeah. Mhm.
Well, and I'm sure, after the council introduces it, I'm sure there's going to be some updates based off council feedback and stuff at that point. And then we'll have to make some updates at that point anyway. So I'm sure there will be plenty of updates and stuff at that point.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so that's, I think, our agenda item related to the election plan. Trying to pull what's next on the determine next step. So I think our next steps are we'll handle some of that update stuff. We'll get that circulated. Other next steps that we'll need to do, I think we need to work with I'll set up some time to talk to Michael about what the timeline needs to look like for the RFP. My understanding based on the last 2 years was that the RFP doesn't need to go out. We probably have a couple of weeks until that needs to go out, but I think we'll want to I'll get some info from him that we can circulate for the committee on what our timelines and deadlines are going to look like for when the RFP will go out. So we know this is when we need to have this is when we need to have some of those criteria that we wanted to make sure are baked in. Like, I know some of the stuff, whether it's capabilities that are going to be asked for, or some of the criteria that we had discussed last year and this year that we want to make sure are inserted in there, like some of the quality control stuff, so we can catch any issues this year with, the printer and everything else. So I've got that as a next step for me. In addition to those, so I'll coordinate with him and we'll get the info, so that way the three of us can make sure we're covering at whatever our next meeting is. We're covering any of the info that we need to make sure is communicated, so it can go out in those requests, so we can make sure it's getting reflected for the vendors. What other next steps do you guys anticipate?
George, I think in terms of what you were talking about, the contract, I just assume the RFP is public, and that I think we should report back in one of our public meetings about any negotiations that went on in terms of the modifications. Like if we hit the vendors up and say, we want a couple of you guys present on election day, and they push back, that we should disclose how we ended up with those RFP items and why we backed down or why we forged ahead and what impact that was.
Okay. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And George, you're going to send the edits tonight to me to look at too, and okay.
It might not be tonight, it might be tomorrow.
No,
What a slave driver that Weller is.
I didn't mean tonight, no.
I'm going, it might be tomorrow before I send them over, but yeah, I will get those turned around quickly. And then the last one that I would say is a next step that is also something that I'll put on my to-do list is, I know we've got the inboxes open. I'm sure coming out of this meeting, coming out of the council meeting, there will be some resident comments. And so that's something where I'll take as a to-do to make sure that we're putting together a summary of those comments that can then be kind of aggregated together and shared up to the council, so they can see if people are looking for a good way to make sure that kind of public comments are being provided. Make sure that the public comments that we're getting as the committee are also visible to the council to help inform whatever deliberations they're having. So I'll also add that to my to-do list, is I'll make sure that whatever comments we get functionally, end of the month and into early January, that's something that's being aggregated and sent up to the council.
Okay.
Any other next steps that you guys want to flag?
Let's leave time for public comments.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think that, checks those boxes. So Opening for resident comments. If you, have your hand up. I think we no longer have the automatic lockout, so you should be able to unmute yourself. But if you're running into an issue, just let us know, either wave your arms or do in the chat box. But first one up, I see Peter Kahn. Peter?
Yeah, Peter.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to comment. I have a number of comments, I guess. The first is that I'm concerned about the issue of handing out ballots during live voting. I think this raises real concerns about ballot security and raises the possibility of fraud occurring. It's better with the a vendor present doing it rather than the committee doing it. But I really think the right way to do this is to mail out ballots, to offer people substitute ballots, through the mail, and have that entirely handled offsite by the vendor. There's no need for live ballots to be handed out during all of the hubbub of the sidewalk celebration. I think it's really a mistake. Secondly, I'm really concerned about the schedule by which ballots are given to people. So, and I think the real issue that's at stake here is that people who are not well-known candidates, unknown candidates, people who have not previously held public office or indeed been much in the public eye, need an opportunity to become known, for their views to become known. The sooner people get those ballots, the less opportunity there is for voters to get to know those candidates before they send in their ballots. So in my view, giving ballots out early in this process, to me, represents a way of favoring incumbents and not giving fair opportunity to challengers to get their names known, to allow people to understand who they are, where they live, what they want, why they're running. And so I would urge that ballots be sent out clearly after the forum, that the forum be scheduled, that no earlier than mid-April, and that people can get their ballots after that, but not before. The third thing I want to object to is that the draft, you guys have now approved the draft that George handed out. This is not the version that was shown to the public, and George's version has not been circulated for public comment. And I'm not even sure that the other members of the committee have had the opportunity to see George's draft and to have gone through it carefully. So I'm not sure that it's legitimate to vote to accept a ballot, a draft set of rules that has not been shown to the public at all. And I think that doing this before it goes to the council is not really a substitute for the kind of thrashing out and discussion process that normally would go on in a committee. And I think, as a member of the public, I would like the opportunity to see the draft that's actually being voted on and voted into effect before it's submitted to the council. I'd like to see it during the committee meeting and prior to the committee meeting. And I am concerned that this is not a legitimate procedure. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Peter. I just wanted to address really quickly the schedule for the ballots going out. So the current order of things going out, when I said packets going out, that is before the forum, that is getting the election packet, not the ballot packages. So the election packet is the thing that has, here's the timeline, here's the plan, here's the candidate statements. then we have the forum, and then ballots are out. I think something that we had discussed in previous years and where my interests are is in trying to get having the forum, but trying to get the ballots out pretty shortly thereafter, trying to provide a maximum period for maximum opportunity for people to mail stuff back. Nobody's feeling timeline compressed and stuff like that. Cause it's
So
always a
I think
balancing act.
It's
because-
really an
and
opportunity.
Peter, hang on. Can I finish my sentence?
Yeah,
Okay, so it's a balancing act because I know the concern you have raised. I know Marty has raised it before that it's getting people ballots earlier favors incumbents. There's also the argument on the other hand that getting ballots later means you're going to have lower turnout. Lower turnout always favors incumbents. That's a long-standing political thing. So it's just finding the balance. I think doing packets, having the forum, and then getting the ballots afterwards, I think that's going to be something that we're going to have to try and tune in. But I understand, I know this is a concern that's been raised before around making sure that people are getting the ballots, but I think trying to get them the ballots to make sure that we're giving people a chance to receive them, to get their ballots back, and nobody's feeling compressed for time, nobody's feeling uncertain about stuff, is something that I can't speak for the whole committee, but I know for me, we're going to work really hard to make sure that kind of all of those concerns are balanced as best we can. Larry?
Yeah, I'm kind of confused. First up, I totally endorse comments that Peter made. I was kind of shocked to discover that I wasted my time looking at this draft to find out this is not what is going to be submitted to the council. The other thing I don't understand is your logic, where you say that everyone seems to agree that the minute people receive the ballots, they're going to vote and get them mailed out, get it one thing off their table. So how does holding the ballots till after the forum reduce the voting? I don't get that.
How would, hang on. So the plan calls for holding the ballots until after the forum. Like, it's people shouldn't get their ballots until after the forum is complete. That was a concern that was raised last year. That's how we did it last year. And
What are you going to do this year?
This year, the way the plan is as written, it's election packets, then the forum, then people should start receiving their ballots after the forum.
So then why are we having this conversation right now?
I'm not sure.
Hmm.
No, I mean, I think that's something that that's why I wanted to clear up. When I said stuff going out before the forum, that was the election packet, not the ballot packages. So ballots would still be coming to people after the forum.
Okay, so could you kindly email me your draft proposal that's evidently going to be submitted, since
yeah,
I'd like
and
to
to me
read
too.
what's actually reality.
Yeah, so I have a question, Arthur, and maybe you can clear this up. The previous version, was that posted to the village website?
It was.
There was a version that went out with the notice of the meeting tonight.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not sure which draft, is that the one you were?
That was my draft, I think.
Okay, yeah,
Okay,
Yeah, I think Michael sent my draft out,
okay.
I think, and
That's correct. That is correct.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, whatever version, once it goes through and I make the updates and clean up, yeah, that'd be, as it's getting sent to the council, is gonna wind up getting, obviously it would get publicized for that anyway, but yeah, I'll make sure that that's
yeah,
something.
but yeah,
that's
if
sent
you,
out at the
George, if
updated
you
draft.
make those changes and get it in, will be part of the meeting packet on Thursday.
So are you saying that I've got to wait till then to see it?
Today's Tuesday, either Wednesday or Wednesday, possibly.
I just, oh, never mind.
So, excuse me, but
This is just not the way to do things, so.
isn't the council meeting this coming Thursday? It's like in
Yes.
2 days.
Yeah, it's in 2 days. So that's, if
So the
this is part of the
public will have-
packet, then you'll see it in a day or so.
So the public will have really minimal time to review this. this
Well,
document.
between then and the council, but then there will be a month before it is adopted.
but Arthur, if it's accepted by the council and then not yet adopted, there won't be time to have another version looked
Right.
at or to have any of those comments really looked at until, because you have to get this started by January.
Right,
So
well,
there
you
is a
have,
time to have more substantive consideration of this draft.
there'll be a month. A month, at any time during that month, you could submit comments.
But
The council's not going to make a decision until January on it, right?
Well, it can't be, there has to be a 30-day
Yeah.
lag.
That Arthur, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is you have to introduce something at the December meeting,
Right,
but changes can be made up through
yes,
voting on it in January.
that's right. That's the whole purpose of introduction and having those 30 days. Is to allow and encourage comment.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, Larry, so the updated draft, once I go through and make these changes, like I said, probably is not going to be tonight. But I should be able to get those done tomorrow, get it circulated so that way Paul and Eric can take a look, make sure it reflects the changes we discussed during the meeting tonight. And then once I've got their sign off, we'll get it over to
can I
them.
ask
So it can
if,
be, Peter, hang on. So then once it's done, then we'll be able to get that sent over. So that way it will be part of that packet. It'll be publicly available and we'll be getting comment. And like I said earlier, one of the things I'll do is if there's any comments that come to the election committee box, I'll make sure those are getting bundled and sent up to the council on a rolling basis. So that way they can make sure that's part of their consideration as they deliberate over the course of the month.
can I ask if Paul and Eric have had an opportunity to review this draft in detail, or if they voted in good faith, assuming that it was a fine draft? Have they
Yes.
really had an opportunity to review it?
Yes,
I'm not sure I've seen it, but George, did you send it to me?
Yeah, I sent it around to all of us. Let me pull my email, make sure I got the date on it.
All right.
last week, right?
Yeah, last Tuesday. So 7 days ago.
Okay.
George, I see Susan and Marty have their hands up there.
Yeah, I wanted to just close the loop.
Marty
Larry,
has
your
one
hand
of her
is-
hands up.
Yeah, Larry, your hand is still up. Do you have any other comments?
No. I don't.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Marty, I saw your hand was up.
Yes, thank you. I would just say, sorry, I'm doubled here. As a procedural matter, it really, Peter, I want to second Peter's point, and Larry's as well, that the residents really should have the opportunity to review the draft you're talking about, because it's not the draft that was attached to this meeting packet. This is just a matter of procedural decency. I also want to ask you to send your draft, whatever you're working from, to every resident who is at this meeting tonight. That's easy to do, so that we can take a look at it before it goes to the council meeting. We need to be able to make intelligent comments about it at the meeting, and we haven't even seen it 2 days in advance. So that's problematic. Would you do that, George?
I want to go through and put in the changes that we discussed tonight before
Right.
before
would you-
anything else gets
Yeah.
circulated.
Would you please send that to the residents who are here when you send it to the council?
So my process is I'm going to go through and make updates because I want to make sure anything that is being shared is accurate and updated. I'm going to then send it to Eric and Paul, my fellow committee members, because I want to make sure that I've got their sign off that the updates and changes that are incorporated reflect what we discussed, what we voted on as a committee tonight. I want to make sure I've got their sign off. At that point, it'll go over to the village manager for inclusion in the packet. And I will try and make, I don't have everyone's email address in the village, but I'll work with village manager to make sure it gets added to the packet and is available as soon as possible going through those steps. But I want to make sure that anything that is going out that people are looking at is updated, is accurate, and is reflective of the changes that were discussed during this meeting.
Given the timeline, I'd encourage you to do that as quickly as humanly possible. Second point, the point Peter made about the advantage to incumbents if you send the ballots very early, like immediately after the forum, rather than waiting a week, as Paul's draft said, really does have an impact, but it's not the one that you said, George. The research on voting patterns is well established. You get a bimodal distribution. Some people vote right away as soon as the ballot arrives. And then there's another lump at the end of people who vote at the very end of the period. So in fact, if you send the ballots early, Peter was correct that you are disadvantaging any new candidates and advantaging the incumbents in such a way that it can create election bias. So I think the timeline that Paul spelled out in his draft is fairer. And we do have an obligation to hold fair and free elections. So it does make a difference when you mail the ballots, and later, held in the forum in mid-April, sending out the ballot packets at the end of April is perfectly fine. With a May 10th election day and a May 23rd ballots due date, sending them on April 30th is plenty of time. Rather than front loading it in a way that really does tend to benefit the incumbents by not giving the challengers time to get their message out. It does make a difference. I'd like you to really consider, all of you to consider that. The notion about ballot security, if you're handling out live ballots, you've already covered 100% of the voters. And I think that Peter's right. I'm the only person here who's actually run in-person elections with a wonderful, full-fledged party on the sidewalk. And I can tell you, it can be a zoo. We had in the big election that we had in 2019, the last one we did on purpose, it took 7 people. We had hundreds and hundreds of voters. It's not like the old days when maybe 110 people voted. We have 300 and 400 voters these days. And that's to do him as credit. That's to our credit. It means that we have voters who care and pay attention. That's a good thing. But I can tell you that having a lineup of people waiting at the voting table in the midst of people with ice cream and kids and parties and vendors and all that, it can get really zooey. And the ballot security issue is important. I would absolutely not want the election committee to try to take on the burden of controlling access to a stack of live ballots at a table in the middle of that public hubbub. I've done it. It's doable. It's really hard. And so I would suggest that they had the sidewalk celebration, which I love, 2 or 3 weeks before the final mailing day, or maybe even in late April, and have the candidates be offered the opportunity to have a table, so that you have still having a wonderful spring sidewalk celebration, but you're not doing it on the day that you're handling the election business. We really need to be careful about ballot security, because it is so easy, if you've got live ballots floating around at all in the middle of that celebration, it's really easy to make mistakes, and human beings are human. I don't think that's a burden that the election committee wants to put on itself. And I think that the plan you did last year with having a very secure metal actual drop box from the vendor, and handling that as a standalone thing, a number of people, 60, 80 people did that, but you only had the completed closed sealed ballot envelopes went into the drop box. You weren't having any live ballots. We had people try to, in past the Martin's editions, we've had people try to actually pick up ballots, loose ballots off the table and take ballot clipboards without getting signed in. I mean, human beings, especially when there's a lot of hubbub, you just walk up and take it. And how are you going to control that? If you have the election vendor, off on a separate table, maybe even in a booth where he can control that stack of live ballots, maybe, but that's still, it's not a good practice to have live ballots on top of a mail vote election. It's great to have the drop box on May 10th. It's not great to have live ballots. I also, again, would really like you to do everything you can to get the residents that revised draft at the same time you give it to the council, so that we have at least 24 hours to look it over before the council meeting. Let me just emphasize that. My other last point is, did you make any other changes in Paul's draft besides the ones you voted on tonight?
I need to go through and flag, because so I used as my basis, not Paul's draft, but last year's plan, and then tried to merge the updates accordingly. So that is something that I will go through and try and flag.
I would have
And
really
try to incorporate
appreciated if you-
make sure that it updates everywhere where kind of Paul had made the updates to the language.
Okay, will you, I mean, I guess I'm not sure, because we're all working from Paul's draft. And I would like to see a markup of Paul's draft that shows all the changes you have now made.
All right, thanks, Marty. So I appreciate the feedback that you provided around the idea of moving the event. That was something that somebody flagged during the lessons learned session last year. And I think that's a really good one that we as the committee will want to have that conversation with the community events and the events committee to see whether or not, yeah, it makes more sense to do celebration on the sidewalk earlier, use it as almost a second candidate opportunity for things like that. So thank you for raising that. Quickly on the ballot security, again, I'm not going to speak for Eric and Paul, but I'm just going to say we're not going to approve anything that doesn't provide ballot security. The proposal that I had seen utilized in other jurisdictions is you're maintaining the ballot control numbers on everything. So if there are live ballots, it doesn't matter if somebody got a hold of them. If they are not updated in the tracking system to reflect this ballot number, this ballot packet number is assigned to this voter, that keeps people from getting a hold of ballots that they're not supposed to have. And it provides traceability and a double check backstop to make sure that nobody mailed in a ballot and is getting one in person. You use those ballot control numbers to make sure that whatever has been, if someone requests a ballot thing, you are voiding their previous ballots. So those will not be counted. Those will get pulled out before we do the counting. And nobody is getting a hold of a ballot that they're not supposed to have and trying to get that voted and slipped in the thing. So yes, I very much appreciate the concern, Peter, that you raised, and Marty, your concern. Whatever approach we wind up doing, we will make sure that that is something that reflects, yeah, the importance of providing those levels of ballot security. Susan, and then Elizabeth will come to you right after Susan.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for all the work you all have done. I agree that the ballots should hopefully not get into the hands of voters until they've really had a chance to have an opportunity to get to know new people running for office. And so that would be after the forum. But also we wouldn't want you to put the forum too soon, because that timing of that forum is really important, that's somewhat out, so that we can have not just a week or 10 days, like I think they had last year, if you were actually trying to campaign and get to know people around the village, but really a longer time. So I hope you'll be really mindful that does give an advantage to incumbents if you compress those, the timing on the getting the ballots to them so quickly. It wasn't clear to me why the chat was disabled in the in our Zoom tonight. Usually we have a chat function open. I don't know if Mike Silliman is aware of that, but there's usually a way to communicate. Also, would have been helpful to speak before the end, after things were voted on. And I do think it makes sense to have one date for the nominations and the statements. It sounds like there was a lot of feedback last year that went in that direction. And I understand George mentioned maybe there was some feedback not that way, or there was a communication issue or something, but I think that makes sense. And I think that it's really important that the voter roll, we have ultimate responsibility for that would lie with the election committee. And the sidewalk celebration can certainly, as I think Marty mentioned, could be a time to showcase campaign candidates. It could be a get to know your candidates time. So there are a lot of different ways to conceive of what happens at that sidewalk celebration. Drop the ballot in a place if you already have the ballot. If you don't, it's a time to get to know the candidates, and that can work also. Overall, the process tonight that was used really undercut the democratic process that was happening prior to this meeting, where people saw a plan. And it was very unclear to me why, George, you chose to simply say, okay, we're going to go with the plan that I circulated, that you circulated, rather than the one that Paul had shown to people and that was public and that there was already feedback on, because you voted on some things that related to changing some items in Paul's. And then later you talked about the plan that you had circulated yourself. And there was this kind of quick sleight of hand on that to me, because that was, we were looking at a different plan. Paul put time into that plan. Other people put time into reading that plan. It was the plan that was public on the website. It's really unclear why this happens, so now basically Paul and Eric have voted on a plan that Eric says he saw and read quickly, but Eric, you and Paul also, and George, you all, as well as what Jeff, Arthur, have seen the other plan that Paul had circulated. To me, it was, I think we need to show some respect for Paul and the work that was done, and for the public that has seen that. And George, changing things at the last like that kind of it makes people wonder again, because this happened last year when there was at one point a very small quibble, a question about one little thing that hadn't been voted on in a plan. It went back to your committee, as I recall, George, and another plan was substituted, which had so many changes that we couldn't keep up with them. It wasn't just the one or two things, it was a lot more. And then discussion was shut down at the meeting about what the changes even were that people were voting on. So this seems to be, I don't want to say it's a pattern. I just want to say, I want to encourage you and all of you on this committee, and that really includes the liaisons, because I'm extremely disappointed in the two liaisons not speaking up about something so obvious that you all just had a plan that you came to the meeting with that was simply undercut and thrown out, and another one was voted on that I don't even know if you've seen. So I just want to encourage you all, and George especially, to be mindful that the public, the residents, we care about things. We care about being included, about having our voices heard, about being able to communicate at these meetings with each other in the chat function, about being able to be heard prior to or during a meeting, because we bring expertise to elections, to fair elections, and where voters, should have their ballots counted. And that expertise is represented by generations of, decades of work in the village. And so I'm just a little concerned about the kind of disdain that I feel is being shown toward work that others do prior to your coming on board. And I'm not just saying that to you, George, because it wasn't just you, it was all of you voted. I understand that, but I'm just disappointed that all of you as a whole were not able to appreciate the amount of work that already went into a plan that was frankly based on the one Andrew did last year. So if we're going to hear now, George, that you took yours off of what was done last year, that's fine if we actually have a chance to see it and, you know, comment, et cetera, but there isn't much time. There's only 2 days. So why in the world would you not have voted on Paul's plan, just adjusting it the way about the points that you had brought up? Unless there were quite a few other points that we're not going to see, and they're going to get in there the way that was done last year. And that was a really heavy lift, because then Andrew had to take it over and say, wait a second, a whole bunch of changes were made here. And, you know, it's not really fair to the council, the committee, and the residents to undercut the kind of democratic, open process that should be happening here. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Elizabeth? Elizabeth, you're on mute.
Yes, okay, thanks. Good evening. I know we're over our, Paul's desire to have it finished in an hour, so I'll be very brief. I just have to add my 2 cents to the procedural note, because I myself sat down before the meeting and spent an hour and a half comparing the 2 drafts, last year's election procedures and the proposed one from Paul Weller's draft for this year. I went line by line, and I must say they're almost identical, maybe about, you know, there are 6 changes, but the majority of the text is the same. So I really don't understand. My question was, why would you use, you know, your draft as a baseline instead of proceeding with that? After all, as I understand, Paul Weller was the the interim chair of the election committee at the time when he was asked to proceed with that and prepare this and submit it to the council and the other people, you know, according to a schedule that had been set up. So what does that mean to be the acting chair? We need to respect the position that if the person was in the seat, did the job, submitted the draft, that has to have some weight. And then I agree with what Susan said, that kind of thing should be respected. So I am disappointed to hear you say tonight that you're agreed that we'll go ahead with my draft as the baseline. Okay, so other people have said that, I don't need to belabor it. Another comment on having a party with the ballot box voting day. I don't believe that election day is the appropriate moment for community engagement. I am very uncomfortable about mixing the two. So I'm happy to see the idea of what people have already said, an opportunity maybe a week or 2 before to meet candidates on an informal basis with community, but I don't think it's a good idea to mix. Another comment on the timeline for mailing the ballots, you know, after the forum. For me, a nomination is meaningless without a submission on a statement of interest and qualifications. So to get just a name on a list, you know, with candidates, that's not sufficient basis to make a vote. So, and I think that this idea of, you know, timing it so that you get new people that are lesser known an opportunity to, everybody has the same starting point and nobody has a head start on getting in front of candidates who might want to get their vote out of their mailbox early. Another comment was on and it really wasn't answered tonight. Paul raised the question, are 3 members of the committee enough? And it really wasn't answered. I personally think that 5 would be much more comfortable. Look at the problem trying to get a second on a vote for a nomination. It's almost ridiculous. So 5 would be a safer number. If you have any other volunteers that put their name in the hat, also to spread the work out, because this job is very, very labor intensive with all these dates and things that have to happen in a short period of time. So I would think that the members would be grateful to have a few more hands on board if that's a possibility.
Amen. Amen.
And then the other comment is in the draft of the procedures, whatever, as much as possible, I think it's a good idea to use statements like 30 days, you know, before, 75 days before, 45 days after, 30 days in between, whatever, instead of using specific dates. That way, there's less fiddling with the procedures next year when you do it again. If you can avoid dates and use timeframes, and something like, that are reasonable. If it falls on a Sunday, that might not be appropriate, but something like that. And that's it. Basically, those are the comments that I had tonight. I enjoyed participating in this. I think it's one of the most important things that Martin's Editions does. And I think everybody needs to pay attention and be involved and have time to comment. And I thank you for allowing me to comment tonight.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that, Elizabeth. And yeah, building on one of the things you said where the list of names on is not as useful. I think that was one of the lessons we took away last year, where following that process of election packets, then the forum, then ballot packets is really helpful, because I know people raised that as a concern last year of they didn't have them before the forum, so they didn't know candidates' positions going into the forum. They weren't able to ask questions based on specific things and those things going into the forum. So that's where I think some of that timeline cleanup should really help this year, to make sure that not just that you have a chance to have the forum before you get your packet, but you have a chance to review the statements before we have the forum. So that way you can be an informed listener during that. You can have an opportunity to submit questions going into the forum. So I very much appreciate that. And that's something we will definitely keep in mind as we're trying to make sure we're getting those election packets done and cleared, and then scheduling the candidate forum at the right time to make sure that everyone has had a chance to look at that, and that the committee has had a sufficient chance to get questions in, so that way we're not rushing the question drafting and prep process as well. So I very much appreciate that. And I wanted to say, on a personal note, I've heard it across multiple comments and I would like to address it. In no way was my draft in any way intended to disrespect Paul. I have the utmost respect for Paul for all of the work he did, and it's continuing to do. The updates, the reason I wanted to go with my draft is because I made some updates to the draft that were the things that we discussed, where it was providing that grace period for ballot or for nomination support material submissions, some of the timing stuff, on some of the timing things and things like that. And it's purely a functional issue, but I can say the draft with the updates and changes I developed is very, very, very similar to last year's plan. It is some minor updates around some of the language and the things that were flagged last year, and it is building on the inputs that Paul provided and making sure all of that is incorporated, and trying to slice in some of those things, and then the things that were discussed and voted on tonight. So just to reassure everyone, and to publicly express that, yeah, I have absolutely all the respect in the world for Paul, for everyone who has submitted those, who has put in time reviewing those drafts. I promise you it is not anything where I'm intending to disrespect. It's purely we've discussed these changes. Let's make sure that this updated draft is reflecting some of those changes.
Let me close this down.
Please let us speak. We've been very patient. I'm concerned.
Marty,
there are other
sorry.
changes.
Marty,
Yes,
can you hold on a sec? So I saw Larry's hand up first, so I'm gonna go to Larry.
that's fine.
So I heard what you said. I tried to work with what you did by asking you if you would send me your draft this evening, tomorrow. I've already listened to the adopted changes that everybody's agreed to today. I know what they are. So there's no reason I couldn't see the draft that you've shown everyone else, except the people here tonight. So there would be no harm in sending that to me, but somehow or other you couldn't agree to do that. And when Susan asked you if there were additional issues in your draft that were not discussed tonight, you didn't answer her. So could you answer her?
So Larry, as to your first point, I'm going to once again repeat that the process that I am going to follow is making the updates, sending them to my fellow committee members to make sure that they have an opportunity to review and it reflects what they discussed and they voted on first. I'm going to extend that respect to my fellow committee members to make sure that they have the opportunity to review any changes and updates first. That is the process I'm going to make. In terms of the comments from Susan, Susan's question relating to the other changes, my draft is a little different than Paul's because it was trying to piece together stuff, given that he and I couldn't meet due to we didn't have a third committee member in the open meetings one. So I will try and make sure that it is updated and reflective, but I can assure you it was using Paul's draft and using last year's draft as the baseline. So if there are changes, I can assure you they are pretty small changes.
Okay, so you can decide that you're going to stick to what you said you do. And of course, since you're running the committee, what else would anyone expect? However, everyone else has already seen your draft. There must be surprises there that you don't want us to see it until it goes to the council and we don't have the time to think about it.
Well,
And
Larry, you'll have a
may
month.
even- wait, excuse me. And I think that Susan's point to you was that since you were decided not to respect Paul's work and work within that basis, that people here were asking you to send what you would prepared so we could look at it and think about it in enough time for the meeting. And you're just being obstinate about it. You want it to do it your way. Well, go ahead and do it your way. I don't think that it tells everyone how you actually view the villagers. And it's to me, it's really, it's just insulting for no reason. Sorry.
Okay, thanks, Larry. Peter, I saw your hand up and then we'll go to Marty. Peter, you're on mute.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, George, that you say that the draft that the committee has voted on tonight is the same as last year's with just a few minor changes, all of which have been identified. And I want to be sure that I understand. Are you referring to the plan that was adopted by the council last year? Or are you referring to the plan that you had submitted at the beginning of January last year? Which plan are you referring to when you say that there have been only minor changes that have been fully identified?
As adopted by the council.
As adopted by council. Okay.
Yeah,
thank you.
that's what I used when I was starting that baseline, was downloading the Word doc from the plan as adopted by council, slicing in some of those edits, and then incorporating the edits that Paul had made in his draft.
So all of those changes are fully identified, through track changes or however you want to do it, in terms of formatting, but they're fully identified so that we can identify every one of the changes that have been made from Paul's draft, or from last year's draft.
From last year's draft, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Marty?
Yes, I want to follow up with some practical questions, because we're not giving us the opportunity to see this before it goes to the council, which I agree with Larry and everyone else, we really should have. First question, one of the things that was important about Paul's draft that I really liked was that he put that phrase about how the committee verifies the voter roll back in the preamble. And of course, the council last year very clearly they approved a verification process that put the responsibilities squarely on the committee. Staff helps, but it's the committee's job to verify the voter roll. Does the draft you're talking about tonight, which we haven't seen, include that specific language about the responsibility for the voter roll and the phrase that has traditionally been in the preamble? That's a yes or no question.
In the preamble, no, but it is included in the body of the document that it identifies that the committee is, but it identifies the committee's responsibility for reviewing, updating, validating the voter roll and ensuring that the updated and validated voter roll is what is utilized during the election.
That's different than a legal responsibility to verify the accuracy of the voter roll and certify it, which is traditionally what we've had in Martin's editions. That's not the same language that the council had last year. And that's really important, because if you don't have independent verification of the voter roll by the committee, you don't have an independent election. So I really encourage you to use the language in Paul's draft there, including the long-standing line in the preamble about the voter roll being the committee's responsibility. It was not deleted last year by any explicit vote by the committee, and it belongs in there. It is a core function legally of the executive of the committee. So the other question I want to ask you, again, is very specific. There was language in last year's 2022 regs about not curing unsigned ballots. And, you know, we now have thousands of mail vote elections. Curing unsigned ballots is standard, normal procedure. It's really not ethical to exclude or disqualify voters for trivial reasons. I mean, we're talking civil rights here. And so I thought that the language that Paul had, which would allow a short period for residents to cure, you know, all ballot problems. That's what Montgomery County does. That's what Oregon, Colorado, that's what's done now nationwide. And there's really no rational basis to not let people cure unsigned ballot. It's easy to fix. Why on earth would you not do that for your neighbors? So second specific question, does your draft, which we haven't seen, include that weird business about not letting unsigned ballots be cured? That's a yes or no question.
Let me look. I can say I didn't do anything related to unsigned ballots in there. I made sure that it reflected the language we had used last year about the committee taking appropriate and reasonable measures to ensure ballots can be cured. But that was the only change I made on curing.
So you would still strip away the civil rights of anybody who doesn't sign that, rather than letting them fix it. That was one of the really great changes I like so much in Paul's draft, because it reflects best practices. We let cure any envelope problem. Don't make it weird exclusions.
So the language, it pops up in two places. It does say in sub-bullet 7, the language from last year said ballot envelopes unsigned shall not be eligible for curing. That's something we can address. But if we do address that, then we also need to address in section 3, subpart B, it says ballot return envelopes must be sealed. So I think that's something that we'll want to address and make sure. I'm sure the council is going to want to weigh in on this. I have absolutely no objection to changing it that way. I can say I didn't update it, but that's because I didn't go through and make a specific update and change in that language. But I have no objection to dropping that requirement, as long as we can put together a reasonable process for identifying and, you know, providing people with an opportunity to cure an unsigned ballot. As long as we can have a reasonable process for it, I have no objection to it. I can say
It's
in my
important.
draft, it still has the language from last year, but that's purely just because I didn't go through and make any changes to the curing language.
Again, it goes back to the point that so many people have made about the protocol here, which is to work from your acting chair, Paul's draft, rather than concoct something entirely different that nobody's seen. Paul isn't even sure he knows which draft you're talking about. I'm glad Eric looked at it, but again, we haven't, and that's not a good process. Please go back and give us a markup on Paul's draft. Thank you.
Thanks, Marty. Any other resident comments? Okay, Hearing none, the last agenda item is setting our next meeting. I think based on updates and conversations, Paul, Eric, it's probably gonna, I think, make the most sense first or second week of January. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah. Fine with
Okay.
me.
Okay, I will send around a scheduling email probably in the next week, and we'll try and find dates that work for everybody with, I'm sure, some post-holiday travel and everything related to that. So yeah, I think we'll target trying to get something in that first or second week of January and make sure we've got a chance to get all of our ducks in the row before the council votes on approving election plan stuff in January, and make sure that we're getting the jump on our communications outreach and everything calendar for getting our calendar squared away for January. Peter, what's up?
Just one more thing. I understand that you want to go through a process that you have laid out. Will we have any opportunity at all as residents to see the plan that you're proposing before it's submitted to the council?
Before it's submitted to the council? No, it'll go to the council and we'll get it shared out from there. But before the council meeting, that's a separate question that's going to have to do with if we don't wind up getting concurrence and everything through, then that's something we're going to have to deal with as it comes up. But I'm not going to circulate it to the residents before it goes to the council. It's going to go to the council first, and then it'll get shared out as part of the election packet.
So we are expected to comment at the council meeting on the draft. You have offered us the opportunity to comment at the council meeting when we still will not have seen the draft that we're supposed to be commenting on. Is that correct?
It's going to depend on timing for when this goes through, but it will go to the council for inclusion in the election packet. If it's not included in the election packet because we can't get the changes updated in time, et cetera, then it's going to be something we're going to have to deal with.
Okay. Remember,
After that, we'll have to have separate meetings though. What?
It's in 2 days.
Yeah. So that's why, thankfully, these changes are pretty minor. So this shouldn't take that long to update. Like I said, I make no promises I'm going to do it tonight. It's 8:45. This meeting's run for a while. So I can't make a promise that the changes are going to get updated tonight. They might get updated tomorrow, and then it's going to see how long it takes us to circulate and get make sure Paul and Eric have a chance to look through it and sign off on it. But how it will get shared is it's going to get shared with the council first. It's going to get, and if it's in time to be shared in the packet, great. If it's not something that's able to be shared in the packet, then it's something that we're going to have to address and figure out a different way to circulate it for public comment.
Will it be circulated to the public after the council meeting, at some point after the council meeting, before the next council meeting a month from now?
Yeah, I mean, it would be circulated in advance of, if it's not able to be included in the packet, then it would be circulated in a different way to make sure that it's something where residents would have an ability to comment on it. But
And so we will have the ability to make those comments by sending an email to the council email inbox.
To the committee inbox, yeah.
To
Yeah,
the
that's one thing I'll do is any comments that come into the committee inbox, I'll make sure we're fielding those. Like I said, I'll bundle those up. I might not forward everyone directly to the council. I might pull them into a packet, once a week and send them up to the council members. But
I see.
Depending on volume, we'll make sure that the comments that come in are stuff that are shared up to.
Peter, let me just suggest that email, telephone call, or bump into me in the street, make any comments in any way that you wish. We'll be receptive. And the public should have it within moments after it gets to the office. So whenever it's sent over to the office, it will be put into the meeting packet for that evening, for a Thursday evening, whenever that goes out. So at the most, the difference between getting something tonight and getting it before the council meeting is going to be like a day difference.
Okay, so we should expect to get it tomorrow at some point. Is that what you're saying?
Whenever George gets the feedback from the other committee members, and incorporates any changes. So there's a process he's going to go through.
Okay, could I ask the other committee members then to check quickly on the changes that have been made and give feedback to George as quickly as possible so that the rest of the community will have the opportunity to see this draft before with as much advance time as possible. Can we ask that of Paul and Eric?
You have my commitment. Yeah.
Absolutely. But Arthur, there is a 30-day window, right?
Right, there's a 30-day window after it is tabled, or not tabled, after it is introduced at the council meeting. So it's there is a 30-day period there after it's introduced on Thursday.
So then at the next council meeting in January, we will have a full opportunity to offer our views at that time. Is that
Right? Yes, and any time in that period, you don't have to wait till the council meeting. You can offer your views kind of the sooner the better. So you have time to we have time to review it.
okay? So the commitment is, as I understand it, is that members of the community will have the opportunity to offer comments in detail on the draft that's up for approval by the council at that time.
Right, correct.
And that changes can in fact be made by the council at
Yes,
that time.
that's right.
Is that
Yes.
correct?
I think last year we made a few small changes at the final adoption that came up. I can't remember what they were, but they were issues of timing and some other things.
Yes, yeah, that's my
Okay.
understanding as well, is that whatever we send to the council for introduction at this meeting does not mean that that is the version. It is something that is intended to be updated and amended over the course of the month. And then whatever the finished version coming out of the January meeting is, that's the final one. Not, it doesn't need to be finished going into the January meeting. It has to be finished coming out.
Right.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you everyone for participating. Eric, Paul, thank you so much, Paul. 52 minutes. It was under 2 hours. So we're trending in a positive direction.
Okay.
January meeting. I promise I will do everything in my power to get the January meeting one closed up in an hour and get everybody out of there by 8 o'clock for the January meeting. So
Thank you.
my
Good night.
promise
Thank
is
you.
strong.
Thank you.
Thank you all. You're
Do we have a motion
magnificent.
to adjourn?
Please adjourn.
Eric moves to adjourn. Do we have a second?
I second it.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And double I.
Excellent.